All right. Once again, good morning, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. This is the second time we've done this particular attainment plan workshop. We did this last week, and this will be the second. They were identical presentations, so you wouldn't have missed anything. But as always, technology can be good and technology can be bad. So if there's any issues, we do appreciate your patience and flexibility, although everything went well last week. So we're hoping for the same today. We are going to be recording this presentation. It's going to be posted on our air quality planning webpage as soon as we can. And then, but the presentation itself, the PowerPoint, is posted on the air quality planning webpage already. So you can take a look at that on our website. Attendees are muted by default. The designated presenters are able to unmute themselves. And comments must be submitted in writing using the Q&A function of BlueJeans. APCD staff will attempt to answer comments at the conclusion of the presentation. Comments may also be submitted to me via email. My name is Nick Cormier, and my email address is on the screen, nick.cormier@sdcounty.ca.gov, no later than Friday, July 31st, 2020. Comments received will be fully addressed in our workshop report, and that'll be sent to all attendees via email in early August. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And once again, my name is Nick Cormier here at APCD, and I'm happy to be with you today and to share this attainment plan with you. With me, we have my supervisor, Kathy Kean, who will be facilitating comments and questions as they come in during the presentation. And one sec, make sure, save some bandwidth here. All right. We also have a few other APCD folks on the line. We have Angie Ortega and Jim Swaney, who can assist with some questions on rules and various permit programs. We also have Eric Luther on the line, who can assist with our SQL analysis. And we also have our IT folks who are keeping us in check and keeping us moving. So the district has collaborated with the EPA and CARB to draft a new plan that provides the blueprint for how the region will further reduce air pollution in order to attain the national ambient air quality standards for ozone. The APCD released the draft plan on July 1st and will hold online public workshops via webinar to gather and consider public input, and then finalize the proposed plan for the Air Pollution Control Board's consideration in late September. The following presentation provides an overview of the draft plan. As always, we welcome your suggestions, comments, and questions. Here's an overview of today's presentation. First, we'll discuss the nature of ozone pollution and its adverse impacts on public health. Next, we'll identify the government agencies charged with regulating it and reducing ozone pollution. We'll then review the key actions already taken to reduce ozone pollution and additional actions that are warranted to further reduce it. We'll highlight the contents of the draft ozone attainment plan and what it means for businesses. We'll review our next steps and timeline, and of course, we welcome your feedback and questions. To start, what exactly does cause ozone pollution? Ozone pollution is formed when common air pollutants emitted by all types of sources, including vehicles, off-road equipment, factories, consumer products, and other sources, chemically react under the influence of sunlight and heat. The concentration of ozone pollution is as dependent on sunshine and temperature as it is on the presence of ozone-forming emissions. This ozone, known as ground-level ozone, is harmful to breathe and therefore is regulated as an air pollutant. Conversely, ozone in the upper atmosphere is considered to be good, protecting us from harmful UV radiation. San Diego, with its sunny climate, topographic features, and proximity to the Pacific Ocean, is well suited to ozone pollution formation and buildup. Air pollution is emitted throughout the populated areas of the county, particularly in the coastal plains. The ocean breeze blows it eastward across the inland valleys. As the emissions move eastward, they have time to react under sunlight to form ozone, which becomes trapped against the foothills and mountains. At the same time, cooler marine air from the ocean displaces the warmer air aloft, creating an inversion layer in the atmosphere that traps ozone pollution beneath it. This is why the Air District's monitoring station in Alpine, which is located at an elevation of around 2,000 feet, experiences higher summertime ozone levels than other areas in the region. Although ozone levels are lower in the populated coastal plain, the entire region is considered non-attainment because sources throughout the region contribute to ozone pollution in downwind Alpine. Ozone pollution is most appropriately addressed through a regional plan, given that sources throughout the region contribute to ozone pollution levels. Whereas much of the populated coastal plain has good air quality with respect to ozone, communities are impacted by localized air pollution from nearby roadways, factories, and port operations, to name a few. Thus, pursuant to state law, APCD is also implementing a community air protection program. APCD has partnered with the Portside Environmental Justice Community to measure air pollution and reduce health impacts in the neighborhoods of Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, Sherman Heights, and Western National City. We are working with the AB 617 Community Steering Committee to draft a Community Emissions Reduction Program, or CERP, separate from today's ozone plan, that will drive deployment of cleaner technologies and reduce exposure to air pollution in these neighborhoods. The draft CERP will also consider incentive-based strategies as well as regulatory, land use, and transportation strategies to reduce localized air pollution. The health impacts of ozone are well studied. In short, ozone makes it harder to breathe. Ground level ozone irritates and inflames the air passageways. Typical symptoms include headache, cough, shortness of breath, and chest tightness when taking a deep breath. As with any health issue, impacts vary widely by person. Children and seniors are at increased risk of health impacts. So are people with existing lung disease and those who spend time outdoors. Because ozone is fueled by sunshine, ozone concentrations are highest in the spring and summer months. Additionally, as previously mentioned, ozone concentrations are typically higher in downwind inland areas. The APCD is part of a coordinated three-tiered approach to regulating and cleaning up ozone and other air pollution. The United States Environmental Protection Agency regulates emissions from interstate traveling sources, including airplanes, trains, and ships. The EPA also regulates large stationary sources of air pollution, which are typically large factories. The California Air Resources Board regulates emissions from on-road and off-road vehicles within California, and also from a broad spectrum of consumer products that we all use on a daily basis, including personal care products and household cleaners and solvents. The APCD has primary responsibility for regulating stationary sources in the region, such as large industrial facilities, including power plants and landfills, as well as smaller commercial establishments, such as gas stations and dry cleaners. What actions have already been taken to improve our air quality? Here's a high-level overview. The APCD has adopted over 300 new and amended rules to control and reduce air pollution from a broad array of stationary sources as mentioned on the previous slide. Staff will continue to implement and enforce these rules in order to safeguard air quality and public health. However, mobile sources comprise a much larger contribution to air pollution, and reducing their emissions is a key strategy for attaining the ozone standards in the region. Accordingly, APCD has entered into an agreement with CARB to assist with local enforcement of the state's regulations for heavy-duty diesel trucks and off-road equipment. APCD is the only air district in California with dedicated mobile source inspectors. The purpose is to ensure that these sources are as clean as they are supposed to be. Additionally, APCD has long implemented grant programs to provide monetary incentives for sources to voluntarily achieve emission reductions beyond what is required by law or regulation. Today, the APCD has allocated $131 million to businesses to upgrade to cleaner, more efficient vehicles and equipment at a reduced cost. Each dollar invested is estimated to result in between $3 to $30 in economic benefits due to fewer workday losses, fewer school days missed, and reduced healthcare-related costs. As a result of these actions, air quality in the San Diego region currently meets 5 of the 6 health-based standards, or limits, set by the EPA, as shown here in this slide. Ozone is the only air pollutant in the region that does not meet the respective standards. Further reduction in ozone pollution is necessary, especially in the inland areas, in order to meet the ozone standards. This is the purpose of the prepared draft ozone attainment plan. Ozone-forming emissions have been trending downward as a result of the clean air actions highlighted earlier. As can be seen in this chart, emissions have dropped by 58% since 2000. In fact, emissions are now at their lowest levels on record. This is noteworthy considering the regional and economic growth that has occurred over the years. The reduction in emissions has resulted in improved air quality, as can be seen in this chart. This is the trend line for ozone pollution as measured at the Alpine Monitoring Station, where ozone levels have trended downward over the years. There is year-to-year variability caused by weather, and upticks in ozone are associated with hotter years. However, overall, these upticks only reflect the flattening of progress rather than a major change in the opposite direction. Regardless, it's clear that additional progress is necessary in order to meet the standards and protect public health throughout the region. But how does San Diego's ozone pollution problem compare with the other metropolitan areas in California? It's not necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison, as each air district has its own meteorology, topography, and mix of emission sources. Regardless, the other areas have also made progress overall. However, each of the large air districts are non-attainment for one or both ozone standards, meaning that ozone pollution can still reach unhealthful levels at times. It is the goal of each of these air districts to further reduce emissions in order to attain the standards and protect public health. But what are San Diego's key challenges to attain the standards? Mobile sources, which are regulated at the state and federal levels, are the #1 challenge to attaining the ozone standards in San Diego. Mobile sources, which generate over 90% of the NOx emissions, are driving ozone pollution levels. This chart depicts the top 7 sources of NOx emissions in San Diego County. Mobile sources comprise the top 6 categories, with NOx emissions from all stationary sources in the region at the far end. This underscores the importance of the district's efforts to facilitate mobile source emission reductions through our incentive grant program and our mobile source compliance program. Climate change and rising temperatures are another challenge to the region's ozone attainment efforts. San Diego has experienced average annual temperatures well above average in recent years, which contributed to an uptick in ozone levels just as the region was nearing attainment of the 2008 ozone standard. This can be seen in the yellow highlighted part of the chart. But there is good news. Since greenhouse gases are often co-emitted with ozone-forming pollutants, the two problems can be tackled together through many of the same emission reduction strategies. Before moving ahead, it's important to put emission reductions in perspective that is more understandable. As we go through the following slides, consider the following comparison. When the metric of 1 ton per day of NOx emissions is used, it is approximately equal to the NOx being emitted from 350,000 passenger cars in the region. As described in the draft ozone plan, ozone-forming emissions are projected to continue to decline in the region, with a 10% drop by 2026 and a 14% drop by 2032 compared to 2020 levels. This will be achieved by continuing to implement all existing measures, as well as recent and planned rulemakings to control and reduce emissions. We have already started this effort with APCD's adoption of more stringent rules for boilers and engines, which were adopted by our board last week. We also plan to amend our paints and coatings rule as well as our stationary turbine and a possible new landfill flare rule within the next year. Alongside these measures, we also will continue to adopt all feasible measures as they become cost-effective pursuant to state law. In addition to rulemaking, the district also continues to expand our incentives program. Many are familiar with APCD's legacy grant programs, such as the Carl Moyer and Farmer programs, but we are also planning to launch several new programs soon that will reduce air pollution. These include regional programs like an old car retirement scrapping program and an EV charger installation program. We are also planning to apply for funding to participate in the Clean Cars for All program at the state level, which encourages cleaner vehicle purchases in disadvantaged communities. At the same time, CARB will also continue pursuing additional regulatory and incentive strategies to further reduce air pollution. These include the recently adopted Advanced Trucks Clean Regulation to increase the number of EV trucks on the market over time, as well as setting more stringent emission standards for heavy-duty trucks and ships, which are the two top sources of NOx in the region. Additionally, in 2021, CARB seeks to establish a smog check type program for heavy-duty trucks to ensure truck emission systems are operating as designed. APCD meets monthly with SANDAG, Caltrans, the EPA, CARB, and the United States Department of Transportation to discuss the region's transportation plans and projects, and to coordinate efforts toward meeting our clean air and mobility goals. The draft Ozone Attainment Plan requires a 30% drop in on-road transportation emissions by 2026 and a 40% drop by 2032 relative to 2020 emission levels. Going forward, in order for SANDAG's transportation plans to receive approval at the state and federal levels, SANDAG will need to demonstrate that the total emissions from implementing those transportation plans will not exceed the reduced emission levels shown here on this slide. As part of this attainment plan, CARB conducted air quality modeling to forecast San Diego's future ozone scenarios. CARB's model uses a complex computer programs, sophisticated computer hardware, and large databases to calculate the impact that San Diego's emissions, meteorology, and photochemistry will have on air pollution. The result is a set of predictions for future ozone levels. The model predicts that ozone levels will continue declining as a result of the projected emission reductions, and the region is predicted to attain the 2008 standard in 2026 and the more stringent 2015 ozone standard by 2032. Federal law allows more time to attain the standard, but doing so triggers a classification of severe non-attainment. Today, San Diego County is currently a serious non-attainment area for the 2008 ozone standard shown on the green arrow, and a moderate non-attainment area for the 2015 ozone standard shown on the purple arrow. The predicted attainment years of 2026 and 2032 are consistent with the Federal Clean Air Act deadlines of a severe non-attainment area for both ozone standards. But while the Clean Air Act does allow additional time to attain, it's not necessarily a free pass to continue status quo conditions. With the severe reclassification comes more requirements. Some of these additional requirements are summarized on this table. They include revisions to what facilities are considered as a major source under federal permitting programs like Title V and New Source Review. For example, major sources currently considered in our Title V and New Source Review program have thresholds of either 100 or 50 tons per year to be subject to additional requirements, controls, monitoring, and/or offsets. It should be noted that the column on the table notes that it's serious for federal permitting programs, that row, though Title V is currently based on a moderate designation as it is today. When the EPA reclassifies the region to severe non-attainment status in the future, that threshold would reduce to 25 tons per year for both programs, with the intended effect of bringing in more sources to each respective program. Though this change will affect some sources in the county, the district predicts that under 25 sources may be affected by the change county-wide. APCD will be engaging with these sources to assist with any regulatory changes necessary. Similarly, the offset ratio for our new source review program will increase to a higher level, going from 1.2 to 1 to 1.3 to 1. Because a severe reclassification is necessary for the reasons we noted today, the draft attainment plan complies with state and federal guidance to satisfy all requirements of a severe non-attainment area for both ozone standards. It includes existing and predicted regional air quality data and emission inventories of stationary, area-wide, and mobile sources of air pollution. It also includes analysis of the existing pollution reduction measures and how they will continue reducing ozone through 2032, as well as future measures that may provide additional reductions beyond what is already predicted. The plan also includes various analyses required by the Clean Air Act to demonstrate that the region will continue to make annual emission reduction progress, as well as the demonstration that the region is not predicted to attain sooner than the predicted attainment years. Finally, the plan includes an attainment demonstration using CARB modeling to conclude the attainment years predicted are appropriate and satisfy all federal criteria. The plan and supplementary documentation are now available on APCD's website on the link on the screen. The plan is long and detailed, as it covers planning requirements for both ozone standards in one document. Consequently, the following chart explains how the document is set up for both ozone standards. Section 1 and 2 provide information that is complementary and shared between the two ozone standards. Section 3, shown in green, focuses on specific requirements applicable only to the 2008 ozone standard. Similarly, Section 4, shown in purple, focuses on requirements applicable only to the 2015 ozone standard. Now that we have released our draft plan, it's important to engage with a wide spectrum of stakeholders, including those listed here and others. APCD has started notifying the following groups to provide transparency and open lines of communication. It is our intent to circle back as time allows to further engage these groups prior to board consideration. Here are our next steps. We released the draft document and SQL analysis on July 1st and presented this presentation to the APCD Advisory Committee last week. Today is the second of 2 public workshops. We are soliciting comments on the draft plan and SQL analysis through July 31st, 2020. We do plan to return to the Advisory Committee once again in August to present any updates to the plan based on feedback received from the public workshops and other outreach conducted. We also plan to present at upcoming AB 617 steering committees in July, as well as to the AIWG committee at the end of the month. If recommended for board consideration, the Air Pollution Control Board would then consider the plan in late September. If approved by the local board, the CARB board would then consider the plan for state approval in late October, and if approved, be submitted to the EPA shortly thereafter. As mentioned, all documentation can be found at the link on this slide or by following the main page of the APCD website. The Air Quality Planning webpage where the document is found also includes fact sheets on ozone, as well as ways that you can be a part of the solution to reduce air pollution, just by doing simple things at home and at work. Finally, our contact information is included here in case you have any questions, concerns, or need to follow up with us on anything you heard today. And that is the conclusion of the presentation. We do thank you for your time today. Once again, as a reminder, we'll be providing more detailed responses to comments in a forthcoming workshop report that would be emailed to attendees in early August. But at this time, we'd be happy to go ahead and start taking questions. And at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kathy Kean, who has been monitoring the questions and tracking them as they come in. So Kathy, do we have any questions at this point?
I'm not seeing any questions right now. So folks, if you do have questions, please go ahead and type them in the question and answer box or in the event chat. We'll give you a couple of minutes. We know it's a little cumbersome to type those questions in. But so we'll give them a couple of minutes, see what questions we can answer for folks.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Are still not seeing any questions. We'll give it another couple of minutes. Here we go. There's a question that asks, can you please re-show the slide with the deadlines?
Sure. Let me reshare here. Give me 1 second. Hopefully everybody can see this. Let me know if you can't, but
I can see it, Nick, so
okay,
I'm hopeful other
great.
people can.
Okay. Yeah, just to reiterate on the deadlines that are upcoming, July 31st is our deadline to get comments in. The advisory committee will happen in mid-August, and then our HCD board meeting is currently tentatively scheduled for the late September, and then the CAR board meeting is presumed to occur in late October, though that's up to them and their schedules as well. So those are the timelines that we're currently working with.
Great. Okay, we could just leave that one up, I guess, for people to look at.
Sure.
We had another question in the chat. Cheryl is asking, will you provide copies of the presentation to the attendees?
Yeah, we certainly can. So if you entered your email address when you logged on, I think everybody should have to, I believe. But we can certainly email that to you. There also is a link on our current air quality planning webpage where you can find the same presentation. So we'll either send the presentation to you directly or send you the link as well. We can certainly do that to all attendees. We may also do that with the attendees that joined us for the Thursday workshop last week.
Great, thank you. We have another question in the chat and one in the Q&A box. I'll do the chat first and then we'll jump in for the Q&A. The chat question is, do we have an estimate of electric/alternative fuel vehicles that will need to be on the road to meet 2015 standards?
I don't think that there's, well, in the plan specifically, we don't call anything out specifically to that point. However, what this plan does is that it incorporates emission models and emission factors that are encompassed through CARB's MFAC system. And what that system does is it estimates air pollution emissions from the mobile source sector, primarily the on-road sector. And so while this plan doesn't get into that quite level of detail called out, what people can do is they can go to CARB's website and go to that MFAC web database. They can download emissions and emission profiles for all years leading up in the San Diego region from today going out to, I believe, 2050. It could go as far as that. And then they also model what you can break it down by the particular source. So you can break it down by heavy duty trucks, medium duty trucks. It also includes passenger vehicles. And then they also break it down by fuel type and population. So you could actually get a sense for what is being modeled potentially in the 2032 timeframe. And by looking at, let's say, EV passenger vehicles in 2032, that's something you could actually log on to MFAC and see what is predicted to happen, both at the state level and at the regional level in San Diego County. So it's possible, it's doable to get an answer to that question. Although our plan doesn't quite report that level of detail for the purposes of this plan. Hopefully that answers the question, but we can certainly clarify that further in the workshop report about getting that data.
Great. Okay, we had one question in the question and answer box. Page G9 discusses the vacuum truck regulation. Can you expand on this?
Sure. So the entire Appendix G or Attachment G is part of our RACM demonstration. So what the intent of that demonstration, which is required by the Clean Air Act, is to determine if there were any measures that we could potentially adopt to get us more emission reductions. If we adopted basically all of them and anything that's reasonably available, and then if we did, would our attainment year shift 1 year? So in our case, we have predicted attainment years in 2026 and 2032 for each ozone standard. The purpose of the RACM demonstration is to see if we could attain by 2025 or 2031 if we adopted these measures. And so that's just a little bit of background of what that section is. Now, in particular, the vacuum truck measure, this is something that a few air districts have gotten into in the last few years, and that is, I want to say, Bay Area and South Coast have been kind of leading the way on that. Although Bay Area did quite a bit of study on it, and so what it basically means is vacuum trucks. They're used in a number of different ways, but in terms of emission reduction, possible emission reductions, when they go to a site and they suck out, let's just say there's a tank at a marina, a fuel tank at a marina, and they're cleaning it out, they need to do a cleaning or something, and then there's a little bit of residual that may be left once all of the fuel has gone out. There's a little bit of residual that a vacuum truck has to come in and pick up. And so it goes into the vacuum truck, whatever residual is there, and it goes into the tanks. And as it stands right now, those tanks are largely uncontrolled as a possible VOC emission source. Bay Area did a lot of work in trying to figure out what emissions came from those activities, and they're frequently used at petroleum refineries and that sort of thing, when they're picking up fuel and stuff on site when it's just kind of sitting there as residual. And so they created a regulation up in the Bay Area to control those emissions with either aftermarket products or on board the truck itself. Now, APCD doesn't have the authority to control emissions from the actual truck. That's something that's set for the state and federal authorities. But the tank itself, that's something that has been shown by Bay Area and South Coast that we do have the authority to do that. Now, that's not something that we're thinking. We don't know at this point if that's feasible for San Diego County, quite frankly. We're also not quite sure of the possible emission reductions we could get. We're not sure how prevalent this activity is in San Diego County, given that we don't really have refineries and petroleum, a lot of petroleum refineries here. But it's something we're committing to look at as part of our state process, which I mentioned. We have to look at all feasible measures. And since this is something that we saw happening elsewhere, we're committing to do so here to assess if it might be a feasible measure down here. We kind of estimated the impossible emission reductions very conservatively in attachment G, for measure G9, as we did with all the rest of the measures. But that's kind of, it's a very conservative scenario for what we think would be out there. We kind of think that it could be much lower than that, quite frankly, the possible emission reductions. But for the purposes of this analysis, we needed to do a conservative approach. And it's something we'll be studying over the next few years as part of our state process. And whether or not it's a possible measure we may adopt in the future, that will have to be determined when we do a full assessment.
Okay. I don't see any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Thank you, Jaylene, for posting the link to the presentation in the chat. Appreciate that. Oh, here's one in the Q&A. When batteries on electric vehicles are done with their life cycle, how do you handle them so they don't pollute? What happens to them? Is it going to be a problem in the future? Landfills, question mark.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I can attempt to answer that, but if there's anybody on the line that would also like to chime in after me, feel free to do so on this. But I know from my own experience in seeing some of the batteries get repurposed almost from electric vehicles, there is kind of a burgeoning industry of the reuse of these electric batteries that are coming in. We're starting to see that in some of the first generations of EVs, such as the Nissan Leaf. Some of these vehicles that were fresh out of the gate, and some of those batteries are starting to decline or may no longer be useful for vehicle purposes, but they still do have value. And so what we've seen recently in the years is industry starting to pop up that are reusing these batteries. They're actually purchasing these batteries from companies who, like Nissan and GM and these companies that are taking back the batteries and they need to do something with them. And so a lot of these companies are starting to take the batteries and then repurpose them for battery management, for example, for their house. So you can install a battery basically for your house and use it for demand management to keep your bills down. They're often associated with solar panels and solar systems at houses where they can capture the cheap energy during the day, and then when the peak levels start to come in the evening, they kind of rely on those batteries at the house so that they're not pulling from the grid. So that's one example of where those batteries are starting to get used quite a bit. As those systems get cheaper, I imagine that will be more prevalent. But that's one idea. If there's other ideas, other folks can feel free to chime in to add to my suggestion. But that's kind of where I think they might go, by and large, in a lot of cases. They'll get repurposed. I don't believe that there'll be I don't believe landfills will be the ultimate destination for those. I believe they're going to be repurposed as much as they can because they still do hold a lot of value, even though their use in vehicles might be gone. And we can provide other ideas in our workshop report as well. Sorry, Kathy.
Oh, no.
We can provide other ideas in the workshop as well, and possibly some links about where those batteries might be going.
Great. I was just working with someone to send them the correct link for the webinar. I don't see any other questions. Just let me check the chat. See anything in our chat box at the moment? Don't see any new questions in the Q&A box, but we'll give people another couple of minutes to type those in. Just see. Still not seeing anyone. We'll give them another couple of minutes.
Sounds good. Once again, if you have any questions, just go ahead and use the Q&A box of APCD Blue Blue Jeans, and then we'll go ahead and try to answer them as best we can. If you do have questions afterwards, that's certainly fine as well. But we'll try to do our best as much as we can to answer the questions we have here today. So we'll give it another few minutes.
Right. I'm still not seeing any other questions. I think folks may be done with their questions. We'll give you one more minute to 9:45, and then if we don't see anything, we'll wrap up. Oh, we have one new one. Great. The question is, how do you see this plan working when our neighbors to the south are not on the same attainment schedule?
Sure. So this is also a question we got in similarity that we got last week at another workshop. But in terms of impacts to air quality, to our neighbors to the north, south coast, the emissions from that area do significantly impact San Diego County's air quality on certain days based on meteorological conditions and other things. But they do certainly impact our emissions here in San Diego. And I would say the same thing about Mexico. It's not as pronounced as that we find, but on certain days it's certainly impacted in our air quality. Since we can only do what we can control in our area. And while we do have programs that we work with the EPA and Mexico, we've got a border program that kind of investigates these kind of tricky issues about controlling emissions in and around the border area and how it works with San Diego emissions. That will certainly be one aspect of how we endeavor to try and do that. There's also some programs that we might be able to work on in the future that could be incentive-based that at least would help some emission reductions along the immediate border area. As we all know, the trucks that are coming across the border in Otay Mesa, it's one of the largest land ports in the nation, if not the world. So things we can do to reduce emissions directly along the border would certainly help. And that's something that we have been trying to do and try to do as much as we can, although the difficulties in doing that with working with various agencies can be difficult sometimes, but it's certainly something that's on our radar. And as trucks continue to get cleaner, I think that will also have an effect as well. As trucks get cleaner in the States, I think one thing what we're finding is there is some movement of trucks that, once their useful life maybe here in California may be done, they could move down south of the border, and that would significantly clean up air pollution down in that area as well, and would also clean up our emissions as a result. So it's a little bit anecdotal, but I think there's potential there that there could be some emission reductions just by systems. As California gets cleaner, there might be kind of an amalgamation of emissions reductions also in Mexico.
Thank you for that, Nick.
And we can certainly, we'll like I said, that'll be something we fully expand on in our workshop report, since that was a question also last week as well. So we'll do a better job of clarifying that in the workshop report for you.
Terrific. Not seeing any other questions in the question and answer box or in the chat. We'll give it another minute or so. Okay, it's looking pretty quiet. You want to talk a little bit about wrapping up, Nick, just as we wait and see if there's anybody else who has any questions?
Sure. Once again, thank you everyone for being with us today. Just as a reminder, we'll take as many questions as we can here, but if you need some additional time to kind of think about it, we are accepting comments through July 31st. We'd appreciate them as soon as we can get them, but we will take them all the way up until that date. And then we will also be continuing to do outreach between now and all the way up to the board date in late September. So, there's certainly opportunities to get some additional comments and feedback from everyone. So if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and check with Kathy one more time if there's any other questions, but otherwise we may go ahead and close out the meeting.
I am not seeing any other questions on the Q&A box or in the chat, so I think we might have addressed them all for this morning.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kathy. And once again, we thank you for your time and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all.